Oh, it automatically records. Look at that.
Mhm.
Chrissy was like, Lynn's going to be on here. She doesn't know how to record. Let me let me take care of that. Um, I'm going to give everybody just 1 minute and then I'm just going to start and we'll just record because I don't know who's going to pop on and not pop on and whatnot.
Mhm.
Okay, we're going to get started. So, welcome. Hello, everybody. We are so glad that you decided to join us for this educational workshop. My name is Lynn Poland. I am the co founder of Kinder Beginnings, a family building support community offering a safe space for those navigating the journey to be supported, heard, and validated. If you have any questions about our programs or how we can help better support you, please reach out to me, or you can, of course, visit our website. Thank you for just making this time and space to talk about medication usage. Meds and shots come with the territory of fertility, right? And I personally remember sitting through my first med training course in my doctor's office with one of my nurses and becoming really overwhelmed and confused by all of the steps
Mhm.
when it came to mixing and injecting all these meds. And I remember her saying, "Oh, you just flip off the cap and then you just like wipe the top to disinfect it." And I was like, what? I don't know what you're talking about. I would never even know to do that. I don't have a nursing degree. How am I going to do this? And I just completely broke down in tears. So that is what this talk is all about. It's about gaining information and tips to make navigating the medications much easier and not as scary. So I'm so happy to introduce Eugene Carelli. Gene is a fertility pharmacist and founder of Fertility Home Care, Philadelphia's only in-home fertility injection support company. So get ready to take notes because Gene is going to be sharing his fertility training guide with us right now. Welcome, Gene. Thank you for sharing this much needed information with the community.
Okay, thanks for having me on, Lynn. I appreciate it. Yeah, as Lynn said, part of Fertility Home Care here. We offer in-home injections for patients, that are going through fertility treatments. I am a fertility pharmacist. And speaking of the training that you went through, Lynn, too, I remember when we went through IVF as well, they kind of put us through the training, and I thought it was very basic, but I thought they were doing that because me and my wife were pharmacists and they thought we were educated on this stuff. And at the time I didn't really know any of these medications. So we thought we got like the quick short version, but that's really how they train everybody, which is kind of lacking a lot of information that people need, especially people that are not healthcare professionals. So now that I have a lot of this information, I'm happy to share it all with you. And then if you have any questions throughout the presentation or at the end, I'm happy to answer anything for anybody.
And
Um,
you can also put it right in the chat there and I will relay it right over to Gene.
okay, that'd be good. So what I'll do is part of my company services, we obviously offer administration of medications for you in your home or training, but we provide this digital training guide for our patients to help navigate the injection process. For free, I give this out to help people, and it kind of breaks down each medication that you would use in the IVF cycle. It doesn't really cover other forms of fertility, but since IVF is the most common and uses the most medications, especially injectables, we made this guide for that purpose. So as you can see, the guide has about 11 medications on here. I'll go through all of them. Each medication is one page on the guide. I'll kind of go through, how to inject it, prepare it, and then, ways to dispose of it and where to inject, and a lot of other caveats with the particular medication. So just to kind of start off, there's obviously a lot of medications on here. You won't use all of these medications. Some of them are replacements for other medications if, for insurance purposes or if drugs are on back order. So you won't use everything here, but I wanted to at least have like a comprehensive guide. So just to kind of overview the medications, kind of the first two here, you kind of see Follistim AQ and Gonal F. Both of these are Follistim products. These are ovarian stimulating medications that they use in the cycle to kind of stimulate egg production. Menopur is another product they use for ovarian stimulation as well. It actually is a form of Follistim from a pharmacological standpoint. These two top products are actually made synthetically, whereas Menopur is actually Follistim given to an animal, and then they extract it from the animal after it's kind of already metabolized. So it's a different form of Follistim. And you would inject both of these products, usually one of the Follistim or the gonal and Menopur simultaneously. The Ganurelix and the Cetrotide, these products are a little different. What these medications do are kind of stop the eggs from dropping. So your normal process when you're stimulating the ovaries is for your body to just want to drop these eggs in the fallopian tube. In IVF, they don't want you to do that because they want to be able to extract the eggs from you. They want to keep all the eggs in the ovaries. And Ganurelix and Cetrotide are medications they use to kind of stop your body from dropping those eggs. So they're kind of like almost reversal agents, if you want to say, of the top medications. And then the next two medications, you see HCG, Pregnil or Navro are some brand names. Avidril is another brand name. These are what they call trigger shots, and Lupron kind of falls in that area as well. So these medications are used kind of at the end of an IVF cycle. And what these medications do is they kind of convert the eggs from 42 chromosomes down to 21 chromosomes, which makes the eggs, viable for insemination. So if you were to do all these above injections and then not take your trigger shot at the very end, when you extract the eggs would kind of be useless. You wouldn't be able to inseminate them. So this is a very important injection. And then progesterone in oil is a medication that they give kind of after the eggs are extracted to kind of thicken your uterine lining. So when they put an egg back in and they put the embryo back in, it kind of, it stays in place a little better, increases the chances of pregnancy and successful pregnancy. So this one is taken daily after what they call the retrieval from the eggs. And then the bottom two medications are what they call HGH, so human growth hormone. So if people aren't responding too well to Follistim and Menopur, they will often give these after multiple cycles to kind of stimulate more egg growth. So these ones are kind of for like treatment resistant patients, and we see it kind of as like a last resort, but these are further injections they use in IVF. So just to kind of give a little summary there, but I'll go through each of the medications here briefly. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to jump in, Lynn, okay? So with Follistim AQ, I kind of list here that medications can be given subcutaneously or intramuscularly. Subcutaneously just means that the injections go under the skin. They're usually short needles, usually in the abdomen or the thigh, whereas intramuscular injections are usually in the deltoid of the arm or it's in the buttocks. So different types of needles, different types of injections. But for this purpose, for Follistim and most of the IVF medications are given subcutaneously. So with all these injections, you want to make sure you clean your hands first, wash your hands. You want to clean the injection site with alcohol. But the preparation of each of the medications and the administration is different, for each of the drugs. So you'll see for the Follistim, I kind of include a little bit of photo here. With the Follistim, it's a little different because they give you a pen device and then they give you a cartridge with the medication separately. And you have to load the cartridge into the pen device in order to do the shot. So this top portion here is actually the pen device. So it has a cap, it has a cartridge holder, and it has like the body of the pen device. And then you see the actual medication is in this little cartridge down here. And then this is little area over here is actually the pen needle device. So you need all of these things to actually do the injection. Once you load the cartridge into the pen device, it's actually good until you can use it multiple times until the medication is out. So sometimes you'll use it for multiple days. Sometimes it'll be a single shot. It all depends on how much is in the cartridge and how much you're injecting. And then obviously you replace the needle every single time to prevent any sort of infection.
One thing that I always found really tricky with that is they always gave me a different amount for the Follistim cartridge. And so I found it really helpful to keep like a running tab on how much I had left, because my biggest fear was that I was going to measure it out and then not be able to inject myself with the right amount. And that's something that nobody told me. It's something I had to figure out on my own. Do you have like a tip for that? I literally just like a piece of paper and like was subtracting.
Yeah. So these available sizes here, I put it, each cartridge comes as a 300, 600, or 900 unit cartridge. And you inject different amounts, obviously, every day, so it can get a little tricky. And sometimes the shots every day can vary in dose. You might do 150 units one day, you might do 300 the next. Right. It all kind of depends. So inside the cartridge, inside the box of the Follistim, they actually have a little slip. And if you flip it open, it actually says, it has like a little graph. and you can actually log your dose for the day. And you want to make sure the reader goes, say your cartridge is 900 units and your dose is, I don't know, say like, I'm trying to make a number that's a little off. Yeah, say it's like 300. So you do a 300 injection one day, you like log day, you do 300, you now have 600 units in your cartridge. The next day you do another 300 units, now you have 300 units in your cartridge. But then say they up it to 375. So now your next day you're doing 375. With this device, what you can do is you can actually dial it to 375. If there's not 375 units in the cartridge, then it won't let you inject it. So what you want to do is, there's only 300 units in there. You could just dial to 300, inject 300, or you can dial to 375, inject. And a lot of people don't know this, but the pens are a little overfilled. They do that because they want you to be able to eject any air bubbles in there, and sometimes you lose a little bit of medication. So sometimes there might be enough for you to do the shot. So if you dial to 375 and inject, and your little dosing window here goes down to 0, you got your full dose. The pen was overfilled. But if it says, it goes, you inject 300 and it stops at 75 because you only have 300 in the pen, then you have to then open up a new pen, dial to 75 and inject again to get your full dose.
See, that's really helpful information. I just thought it would just let me do it and not know that there is something in there that would stop it, or like let me know that I didn't get my full dosage. I also didn't know about the graph either. These are things that nobody tells you about that would be really helpful information, right?
It's really true. I always tell people to dial your full dose, do the shot, because you want to use up the pen. These pens are expensive. You want to use up everything that's in here. A lot of people will just put their pen aside, start a new pen because they don't think there's enough in there. And then they go and use the next pen. Exactly. And then at the end of your cycle, that pen that you previously used, you could have used, but it's now expired. So now you kind of waste the money on that device. So yeah, always try to use it if you can. And that's, very ideal. And
that's really helpful, helpful tip, and something I kind of wish I knew 6 years ago. So,
so yeah. And then obviously, replace the needle tip each time. And when the cartridge is empty, you take out the cartridge, you put in a new cartridge and so forth. So, with this one, you cannot dial the pen backwards. I'll tell you with the follow stim, you have to dial it directly to your dose. If you don't hit your dose, then you got to completely dial forward. So if your dose is 300 and you dial to 350 by accident, you can't dial back to 300. You have to dial all the way up to, I think the pen goes to 450 or 600. And then you have to dial past 600 and it goes back to 0. And then you dial to 300. So this pen's a little tricky that way. They don't always tell you that either. So as far as injection sites go, it's usually done in the abdomen. It's closest to the ovaries. Technically, you can do it in the thigh, but they like to do it locally if you can. So it's a little hard to see on this graph, but you would dial if you hit your zones around your belly button, kind of 1, 2, 3, and 4. You kind of want to rotate those sites. With the follow stim and the gonal, we usually have you do, with my patients, I have them do a 1 and a 2. Because that's the most pleasant shot, and it's easier to do it in the upper portion because you have a little less fatty tissue. And the more difficult shots, we usually aim at 3 and 4 in the bottom portion, where people usually have a little more fatty tissue. And it makes those shots a little bit easier. So actually targeting certain injections in certain areas can make the shots a little bit easier. That's one of the things we do in my company to help people. So, and then, as far as storage, everyone thinks that a lot of these medications everything is refrigerated. They're not. This particular medication is refrigerated. It's good in the fridge until its expiration date. But once you start using it, it's only good for 28 days. And you're basically always going to use this medication within 28 days. Your cycle is probably only going to be 12 days at max. But once you start using it, the most important thing with this is once you do the first shot, you can then keep that pen at room temperature. You don't need to put it back in the fridge. If you have to go somewhere, you can take it with you. Some people are traveling. So once you load that cartridge, if the pen's good for 3 days, you have 3 days out of the fridge. And then you'll take your next box out of the fridge, load that pen, do that shot, and then that pen can then stay out of the fridge as well. So
also did not know that, would always put my pen back in the fridge.
So yeah, I mean, it's fine. The medication will be okay, but it's unnecessary. And when you inject cold, it's more irritating. So you want to always inject at body temperature, which probably is another thing they don't always tell you as well. So, if you leave it out, it's easier. You don't have to take it out, let it, wait and, 30 minutes for it to get to room temperature. It'll already be at room temperature. You do the shot and you're good. So, and then, yeah, so, and then I have instructions on here, if the pen doesn't deliver the full dose, what you have to do, which we are kind of already talked about. So, and then just make sure you're always disposing of all your sharps in a puncture-proof container. So if you have a sharps in here, that's great. You can go to CVS, Walgreens, buy one. They're not that expensive. Or if you have like an old detergent bottle, something that's puncture-proof, you can throw them in there. You seal them. A lot of people ask me, what do I do with them when they're done? You can throw them in your regular trash. You do not put them in your recycling. The regular trash is a proper way as long as they're sealed. We just don't want anyone to get pricked, like any trash men or anything like that. And then they have to get, tested for hepatitis and HIV. So, we want to keep it in these puncture-proof containers to protect everyone. For the most part, that is that medication. The gonal is very, very similar to this. The one nice thing about the gonal pens are that you don't have to load the cartridge. The cartridge is already in the pen. You buy the pen. The only thing that comes is just the needle and the pen device. So it's already in there. And these also come in 300, 450, and 900 unit pens. I actually like this pen a little bit better because number one, you can dial to your dose. If you dial over, you can dial backwards with this pen device. So you don't have to ever worry about, going all the way over. But it's basically the same as the follow stim. You screw the needle tip on the top, you remove this protective tab. This is your actual needle, and you have two caps. So you remove the outer cap and then remove the inner cap, and then you're ready for your injection. With this one, it's the same locations. We usually do it in the upper portion of the abdomen, like 1 and 2. It also needs to be refrigerated as well. But again, once you do the first shot, the pen's only good for 28 days, and you can keep it out of the fridge as well. These pens are actually also good for up to 3 months if never used at room temperature. So if you keep them in the fridge, obviously they go through the expiration date. But if you happen to leave it out, or you get a delivery from your pharmacy and you're not home for 2 days because you're on vacation and it like sat out and got the room temperature, you can actually keep it at room temperature for up to 3 months. So if your cycle is starting, you don't need to send the drug back. You don't need to throw it in the trash. You can still use it as long as your cycle is within 90 days. All right. So it's also helpful. Same disposal process and kind of same, pen devices. Sometimes the injection amounts that you take are not very even. Sometimes, you're taking 175 units per day. So you're going to have to do a little bit of, some people don't want to, they just want to jump to their next pen. But if you're okay with doing 2 shots, finish up your 1 pen and then jump to your next pen so you kind of get the full use out of it. It's always the best way. I've seen people say, I'll save this pen towards the end of the cycle and hopefully I'll be able to use it then just in case there's like leftover medication. But then I've seen people where their cycles got canceled, especially during COVID, certain things that happened. So they ended up like not being able to use the medication when they could have, originally. So now jumping to Menopur. Menopur is the other ovarian stimulating product. This one is a little more complicated.
A little. This is when I broke it down into tiers, like the mixing and the.
Yeah. This is complicated. Yeah. So this one you have to mix. There's a powder vial. There's a liquid vial. You have to mix the two to activate the medication, and then you inject. So you have a powder vial with a peach cap. They have a liquid vial with in this picture it's a blue cap. They recently changed it to a gray cap. Whatever comes as, there's a diluent vial of sodium chloride, and then there's the powder. The powder in the peach cap is the active medication, but it's not active until it's mixed with the diluent. So you'll see here that there's a few things that you're going to need. You're going to need a syringe. You're going to need a Q cap, which comes in the box. And then you're going to need some alcohol swabs as well. And then you're going to need the powder and the liquid vial. So the way to do this is you're going to pop these 2 plastic caps off. You're going to clean the tops of the stoppers. There'll be little rubber stoppers on there. Clean those with alcohol. And then what you're going to do is this little Q cap, and it's a little hard to see in the photo here, but there's a little Q cap and it's a plastic needle. And they designed it because a lot of people were pricking themselves with an actual syringe. So what this is you'll see a fatter end of the Q cap and then a thinner end of the Q cap. And I might be able to zoom in a little bit. So what this is you're going to take a syringe and you're going to attach a syringe to the small end of the Q cap. And the fatter end of the Q cap is actually going to snap onto these vials. So you're going to snap it onto the sodium chloride vial first. And what you're going to do is depending on your dose, you're going to put in the amount of air, the amount of liquid you need to extract. You're going to put that amount of air into the vial. So in order to get this liquid out, you can't just pull it out. You got to put some air in, otherwise a vacuum forms. So when you're injecting 75 units of Metapure, which is one powder vial, I'm going to explain that first. Some people are doing higher doses, but to keep things simple, what you'll do is extract 1 ml of the liquid out of here. So you'll put 1 ml of air in to the liquid vial and take 1 ml of liquid out. And then you'll unsnap the Q cap and you're going to snap it onto the powder vial and you're going to shoot that 1 ml liquid into the powder vial. Okay. That's going to activate the medication. You can swirl it a little bit. I wouldn't shake it because you don't want a lot of air bubbles to form. Just kind of give it a few minutes to fully dissolve. And then what you're going to do is you're going to pull all that liquid up into the syringe. That's your dose. Okay. Once the medication is in the syringe, you're going to take the Q cap off and you're going to stick on a little needle, which is usually a 27 gauge. We use a 30 gauge, so somewhere in a 27 to 31 gauge range. So usually a short needle, 1/2 inch. The gauges, if people aren't aware, is like the diameter of the needle, right? So the higher the gauge, the thinner the needle. So a 31 gauge is like an insulin needle. It's very, very thin. Whereas when you get to like 22 gauges, they're very, very wide. Okay. So a 27 to 31 gauge is a very, very thin needle, and a 1/2 inch is the length. So it's a very, very short needle. You'll put that, needle on the top of the syringe, push out any air, and that's your dose when you're ready to inject. All right. I know it's a little complicated. There are videos that show this as well. And obviously I have a lot of written instructions here so people can follow. Some people prefer like written directions over videos, but and this one is also injected in the abdomen. Now we usually do this one in the lower portion of the abdomen, primarily because this one will sting a little bit more than the gonal and the follistim that we previously talked about. Because this one's mixed, it's a powder. It's going to be a little irritating. The other two medications are well dissolved solutions. They won't be as irritating. They're going to go in a lot nicer. But with this one here, you usually want to aim in the bottom portion where you have a little more fatty tissue. This way it won't bother you as much.
Gene, what about like the angle of the needle? Like, does it matter if we're going straight in, if we're kind of angled? Does that make a difference?
So with these subcutaneous injections, it doesn't really matter. You can go in at kind of 45 degrees or you can go in at kind of 90 degrees. It doesn't really make much of a difference. The needle's not long enough to get into any other area. It's just going to kind of go directly under the skin. So however you feel comfortable. People should keep the skin pinched. You can do it the whole time you're injecting. Just make sure you don't prick your fingers. But that's kind of the important thing. Just kind of keep the area pinched. You want to be able to grab skin. That's the main thing. With the intramuscular injections, that's a little different. You kind of want to lay the skin flat. You're going a lot deeper, but these shots are pretty tiny. So with this one, in some cases, you're going to take a higher dose. In some cases, some people will have to do 150 units. I get a lot of patients asking me, well, you have to do 2 shots. I mix one liquid with one powder, do the shot, and then mix another liquid with another powder and do the shot. You don't have to do that. You can double concentrate the shot, do a single shot. So in this situation, you would move the liquid from one powder, move the liquid from the diluent bottle into a powder. That will create 75 units worth of medication. When that becomes a liquid, instead of drawing it up and injecting it, you would draw it up and put it into another powdered vial. The liquid is enough to dissolve 2 powder vials, and that will create a dose of 150 units. And then you would then draw that up, put your needle on, and inject that. And that's like a single dose. And that makes things a little bit easier. And this is kind of the instructions I have down here for that as well. You would use 1 syringe, 1 Q cap, 1 needle. It just is 1 extra step of mixing another powder vial in there.
I was on 300 at one point, which was really fun. It's like an entire box.
Yeah.
I remember being like, this is an entire box.
And I didn't want to, yeah, you can do up to 300 units with this. And did you do it as a single injection?
I did, but now I'm wondering if that was incorrect. Was that right?
You can do that. You absolutely can. You need all of the liquid. So these little diluent vials are 2 mLs. When you're doing 1 or 2 powder vials, you can just mix 1 ml, keep your volume small, and you can do the injection that way. When you're doing 300 units, you need to draw up all 2 mLs. I don't know if you were doing that. You kind of need all 2 mLs to dissolve that much powder. But it also, if it's really concentrated at 300 units, it's going to really burn probably going in if you're only using a small amount of liquid, right? So the more liquid you
It did
use,
burn.
yeah, yeah, the more
It did
liquid you
burn.
use, the more, dissolved it is, and the easier it'll be on you as well. So yeah.
Again, when you go through these injection trainings, so much information is thrown at you, and like you're coming in saying, I don't even know, like I've never given myself a needle before, like just teach me how to even do that. And then all of a sudden you're mixing medications, and then I'm doing math, and I feel like I have like
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out my dosage. It's just so overwhelming, and this information is just so helpful, not just in the presentation, but that there is a physical paper that you can read and just refer back to, like a reference guide, right?
Yeah.
So incredibly helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So we try to make it as easy as possible. It's a lot of medications. It really is. So, giving the injections are difficult, especially if you've never given injections to yourself before. One of the reasons why I created the company, really just to train people on how to hold a syringe, how to draw up medication, how to give an injection properly to yourself without, hurting yourself. We train a lot of husbands on how to do the injections properly. They say like, oh my God, my husband's been hurting me every single night for the last 3 weeks. And then I train him, and then all of a sudden it just doesn't hurt that much. And they're like, oh, we wish we would have brought you in sooner. It would have been so much easier. So it's small little caveats we can teach will make a big difference when doing these medications. So with the Ganurelics, and by the way, if you kind of see anything that has a copyright symbol, is a brand name product, which means it's only made by one company, it's trademarked, and it's usually very expensive. So a lot of these medications fall into that category. But if you're wondering why I put that legally, because there's no generic version of the product on the market to give. So with the Ganurelics, this medication, it's very nice. It comes as one dose. It comes as a pre-filled syringe. The medication's in a syringe. They give you the syringe. You don't have to draw, mix, do anything. You just have to pop this little cap off. There's usually a little air bubble in there. Just kind of push out the air bubble, push this plunger up a little bit, get the air out of there. But you're pretty much ready to inject at that point. This one is usually given in the thighs. It can be given in the abdomen, but most offices, it depends on your clinic, will have you given in the thigh just to give your stomach a break, because you're doing gonal and usually Menopur at this point every single day, and you just want to give your abdomen a break. So usually this one's done on the thighs. From the photo, you can kind of see there's kind of 2 or 4 different areas. We usually say if you cut like your leg from hip to knee, if you cut it in half, you want to aim in the upper portion from your hip halfway down. That's where you have the most skin to grab. We don't do it directly on top of the thigh. We usually do it a little bit off the side, if that makes sense. Just so you have a little bit to pinch there. And that's where you want to do the injection. You can go in at 45 degrees or 90 degrees, and you just inject the entire syringe. It's once a day injection, just like the gonal and the Menopur and the Follistim. They're all once a day. And this one is usually offset, usually gonal Menopur in the evenings. This one's usually done in the mornings. And this one is a room temperature injection. No need to ever store it in the fridge. Please don't store it in the fridge. It's not stable in the fridge. You just keep it at room temperature. And then when you're done, just dispose of it, in the sharps container. And that one's fairly easy to do. This one, for most people, some people either say this one hurts the most or hurts the least. I can't find out why. I think most people either struggle with the thigh injection or it's like the easiest spot. I think it's more with the location than anything, but it's a fairly easy medication to use. So
I found this one to be the easiest, and I think it was just because of what you said, just administering it. It wasn't even the administrating, it was just I pulled it out of the box and I just injected. But I did mine in the abdomen. I was never even offered the thigh. I didn't know that was a thing.
That is a thing. Yeah, it is. And the Cetrotide is kind of like the brother of the Ganurelics. You don't ever take them together. It's one or the other. The Cetrotide is not often used as often, primarily for 2 reasons. One, it's refrigerated, so Ganurelix is not, which is nice. So you have to refrigerate this one. And the second part is you have to mix this one just kind of like the Menopur. So it's a little more complicated of a mixing process. So they make it as easy as they possibly can. If you see from the photo here, you kind of have a syringe with a pre-filled diluent. The diluent's already in the syringe. You have a little yellow needle, you have a little gray needle, and then you have a powdered vial, which actually has the medication in it. So what you have to do in this situation is pop the cap off of the little vial. You have to attach this yellow needle onto the syringe with the diluent, and then you shoot it into the powder vial, and that activates the medication. It's a little bit easier than the Menopur because you don't have to transfer liquid. The liquid's already in the syringe. So it makes it a little bit easier there. And then once the powder fully dissolves, you draw it up with the same, yellow needle on the syringe into the same syringe you had. Once the medication's in there, you pop this yellow needle off and you put this little gray needle on. It's much shorter. And then that's what you use for the injection. Again, usually injected into the thigh, same location as the ganurelix. And you just keep rotating your injection sites each day. But because of the storage requirements and the mixing, this one isn't really used as often unless your insurance requires it. Most of the time they don't do this. So with this one here, let me just see here. Yeah, it's a single dose. Once you take it out of the fridge, you're going to mix it, do the shot. There's no reason you have to put it in and out of the fridge. You're going to take it out, do the shot, and then, give the medication. So are you still there, Lynn? Did I lose you? I might have lost you. Okay. I'm going to keep going because it says it's still recording. Let me see here. So I'll keep going because it looks like it's still recording. So with the HCG, now this is one of your trigger shots. Now this medication comes in several different forms. There's a generic version of it called HCG. There's brands called Pregnil and Navaril. And as you can see, I have the brand Pregnil here in one of the generic formulations. So you can see this shot can be given in a couple different ways, depending on where you're at in your cycle. It can be given intramuscular or subcutaneously. So depending on how you're going to, inject yourself, kind of depends on the way your cycle is going, and the way you mix it and actually inject it depends on, your administration. So if you're taking it subcutaneously, you're going to mix it one way and inject it. If you're taking it intramuscularly, you're going to mix it and inject it a different way. You have to follow. Oh, are you back, Lynn? Hey, okay.
I'm sorry, my computer shut down. Yeah, but
that's okay. I kept going anyway because it said it was still recording, so I'm just going.
Awesome. Sorry about that.
No problem. So I'm just kind of at the step here where, depending on how you're taking the trigger shot, follow your doctor's instructions specifically, because if you're doing it subcutaneously, you're going to mix it and inject it one way. If you're doing it intramuscularly, you're going to mix it and inject it a different way. You're going to use different needles. But this one, like the Menopur and the Cetrotide, you have to transfer liquid over from the one vial into the powder vial. And then once that's activated, you draw it up and inject it. Now, depending on how you're injecting it, you might move over a small amount of liquid, or you might move over like a lot of liquid. It all depends on, how you're taking the medication. So follow your doctor's instructions exactly. And this is the medication that has to be given at a very specific time, usually in the evening, 36 hours prior to your retrieval. So just follow your doctor's instructions very, very carefully with this medication. Unfortunately, there's no Q cap with this one. You have to use a needle to draw out the liquid and put it into the powder. And then you have to use, that needle to draw it up into the syringe and then change your needle out depending on how you're injecting it. So
I cannot tell you how many women have come to me and said that they have used the wrong needle to inject.
I believe it. Yep. I've seen people inject with an 18 gauge needle, which I don't know if you've ever seen an 18 gauge needle, but you can see down the chamber of the needle. It's very, very wide. It's almost like a straw. I don't know how people would even inject with that. That's amazing. But you use thinner needles than that to inject this, but they're still very long. They're usually 1.5 inches in length.
They're intimidating.
Yeah, they're very intimidating. So this is a very difficult shot for people. I see people sometimes mix it wrong and inject it properly, but it was mixed wrong and they didn't get their full dose. So I get the clinics calling me, they didn't get the full dose. You need to go mix it properly. They only have 12 hours to take this medication correctly, or their entire cycle is canceled. So, oh, my whole thing jumped out. But let me see if I can get back to that. Why did it do that?
Yeah. So, and this is why it's so important. You do all of this work for 10, 12, 14, 16 days. When it comes to this last shot, it's so important that you get it right. And so it's intimidating for that reason, because you know how important it is, and just the length of the needles, having to mix the medication. And I know for this one, it was not one that I could do by myself, right? I needed somebody else. The other ones I was able to navigate on my own, but this one you really need somebody to
Yeah.
help you out with this one too. And the timing, like you said, I remember it being like 7:30. Like it can't be 7, it can't be 8. It needs to be 7:30. You need to inject this medication. So it's intimidating for many reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. It's tough. I say with our company, we probably do this shot the most for people because it's the most difficult to do, especially if it's
Super important.
intramuscular, because it needs to be given, in the buttocks. As you can see, is the photo. If it's done intramuscular, it's given in the buttocks, in a very particular area. And then if it's given subcutaneously, you can do it in the same spots that you would do your going on your Menopur and those other injections that we talked about previously. But yeah, it's a little difficult, and the mixing is a little bit more complicated as well. With the syringes and needles. So, but what's nice about this is the single shot. You mix it, you do the shot. You don't ever have to do it again, as long as you do it properly, and then you're good. You don't usually have to take anything else the following day, and then the day after that is usually your retrieval for IVF. So you have like that little bit of window there where you get like kind of a break of medications before you go in for your retrieval.
What advice do you have for somebody that like they're about to take the shot? They're like, yeah, I got this, and now they're going to do it and they're confused. What do you do now? Like now, like, oh, I thought I had this and now I don't have it.
Call me. Yeah. Call pharmacy that dispensed it to you. Usually they have a pharmacist on staff that will talk to you. I get a lot of people at night call me. Most of the patients are getting these through mail order pharmacies and they're open 24 hours. But if they're not, call your local pharmacy. A lot of pharmacists will know, or, feel free to reach out to me. I'll leave my information with Eugene and our website. And my line is 24 hours. I talk to patients every night. So if you need anything, I'm happy to walk anyone through this stuff. So
yeah, there's nothing worse than panicking last minute.
yeah, absolutely. So most people do it correctly, but they think they do it wrong. But as long as you just assure them that they did it right, it's fine.
That's
and
validating too.
That is, yeah. So this one, if sometimes people will mix this ahead of time by accident, you can store it in the fridge. Pregnol is good for 60 days at refrigerator temperatures, and Navaril, the brand, is good for 30 days. So, if you accidentally mixed it, not realizing you're not supposed to take it, you don't have to throw it out or go get a new one. You can store it in the fridge for this amount of time and then use it at your designated time in your cycle.
Could that be something else that we ask our clinic to do? Like, could I bring my medication into my clinic, say, can you mix it for me, and I'll just put it in the fridge and then I'll just inject it when you tell me to?
They could. I'm sure they could do that. The nurses, I don't think a lot of the clinics know that you can do this, so they wouldn't ever offer this, I think, as a option, I think. So you really need to talk to a pharmacist. I think that's where pharmacy really comes into play here, because the clinics throw a lot of these medications at you, but they don't always know, the proper way to inject these medications, because they're just more on the medical side of things and less on the prescription side of things.
I think that's also really helpful to just know that your pharmacist is there to help you as well, because oftentimes we think about calling our IVF nurse or calling our doctor.
Mm-hmm.
We don't often think about, oh, I should call the pharmacist. And what you're saying is call the pharmacist.
Yeah. And the nurses, they're there 24 hours a day. Usually they have a direct line, and they're happy to help as well. I think they get a lot of calls about these medications, specifically the trigger shots. So feel free to call your nurse. They probably know this medication the best of any of them, because I think they kind of deal with this, and with the timing of the shot, they're always talking to people at random hours. So yeah. So just to move on a little bit, Avidril is just another trigger shot. It's actually the same as the medication above, but this one is used in a different form of fertility. It's usually used in IUIs instead of IVF. It all depends on your clinic. Sometimes I've seen this in IVF as well, or when the Pregnols and HCGs are unavailable. There's been a pretty big market shortage on these medications right now. People haven't been able to get them. So some people, the doctors have been turning to like an Avidril or 2 Avidril shots to kind of compensate for the difference. This one's nice. It's very similar to Ganurelix. It's a pre-filled syringe. Just pop the cap off. You just inject the full syringe. It's usually done in the abdomen, but you can also do it in the thigh. Just pinch the skin and inject the full syringe. There's usually a small air bubble in here too, so just push that out before you give the injection. So, but this one is one of the easiest injections to give. I feel like, most people do this. This one is stored in the fridge. You want to take this out about 30 minutes prior, let it get to room temperature, so it's less irritating. You can inject cold, but it's going to bother you a little bit more. So I always tell people take it out about 30 minutes prior, let it get to room temperature, and then do the shot. This medication, like the medications above, the Pregnil and the HCGs, these medications will give you a positive pregnancy test. These medications are what the pregnancy tests detect. It's the HCG levels. So if you take this shot and in like 2 days want to randomly try to see if you're pregnant, or right after the retrieval, you're probably going to get a positive test, but it does not mean you're pregnant. It's probably this residual medication still in your system. So you have to kind of let this tail off. And then if they do a transfer, obviously usually wait 14 days or something after a transfer to actually, take a test and see if the pregnancy is actually successful or not. So I always tell people be very careful. Don't take a test too shortly after this to find out if you're pregnant, especially after an IUI. Lupron is a medication this is kind of like the Swiss Army knife of IVF. It's used in so many different ways in IVF. They use it as a trigger shot. They also use it as a way to kind of prevent ovulation so that between transfers in IVF, you can kind of jump to your next transfer a little bit sooner. You don't have to wait like a full 30 days. So it kind of does a lot of different things. This kit is really nice. There's really only one company that makes this. So you're basically going to get this manufacturer. It's Sandoz. There's syringes in here, little syringes. This is the box. Inside the box, there's a little powder, little liquid vial. It's already mixed. And there's also alcohol swabs in this box as well. So it's nice. It gives you a nice little kit. And basically, when you want to draw up your dose, every dose is a little different. When you're using it for ovulation suppression, you're usually doing like 5 to 10 units a day. These syringes are in units. You would draw up like 5 to 10 units of air, shoot it into the vial, and then draw out 5 to 10 units of liquid. That's your dose. Or in some situations, if you're using it for a trigger shot, you'll have to inject 80 units of this at one time, which is a larger amount. The syringes inside the box, which they do not tell you, are only 50 unit syringes. You cannot inject 80 units with these syringes. If you're lucky, your pharmacist will give you extra syringes knowing that this is a trigger shot, and they'll give you larger syringes that hold up to 100 units. This way you can draw up to 80 units. If you did not get those syringes, you can use the syringes from Menopur. So feel free to reach out to me or your pharmacist or your nurse. And if you have to draw up 80 units, that is equal to 0.8 mLs. So it's a little less than 1 ml. So you can actually draw that up on a regular syringe if you just know where to stop on the syringe. And then you can actually do it on there. And this way you don't need to do multiple injections. You don't want to do, a lot of nurses will tell you to inject 50 and then do another injection of 30. But people that are afraid of needles don't want to do 2 injections, obviously, if they don't have to. And you don't need to. And this is always done in the abdomen for the most part. It's a subcutaneous injection. It's a very small needle, usually a 30 gauge, 1/2-inch needle. And you just, do the shot. But yeah, it's a fairly easy injection. It doesn't burn very much. It's pretty easy to use. And as you can see here, I kind of broke it down. If you're doing 80 units, you have 0.8 mLs, or 10 or 5 units are 0.1 mLs or 0.05 mLs. And they kind of dose it in units because the syringes that come inside the box are in units. So you're always going to hear units with this medication versus mLs with a lot of the other medications. This one is room temperature as well. You don't have to store it in the fridge. The manufacturer recommends after first use to store it in the fridge, but generally speaking, you're going to use this medication within 30 days and you're not going to use it again. You're going to need to get a new box in 30 days anyway. So I usually tell my patients to just keep it at room temperature, use it for your cycle. And then after 30 days, when you have to go to another cycle, you're going to have to get a new box anyway. So you come and get a new one from your pharmacy. And there are 280 units in this little vial. So it doesn't look like much. Everyone says, oh, I'm not going to have enough. There are 280 units in this little vial. So you have enough to do multiple triggers. You don't need to go get more medication. So progesterone and oil. This one is a big one. So a lot of people really struggle with this shot. This is one of the only intramuscular shots you have to do. And this medication is given in the buttocks. All right. So it's a difficult area. And it's drawn up and it's an oil. So it's not like some of these other medications that are very thin and well diluted. It's very thick. So you need to draw it up with an 18 gauge needle, which is a very, very wide needle me and Lynn were talking about. And I apologize, it's getting a little dark here, but we're almost done anyway. So you want to attach an 18 gauge needle. It is 1.5 inches, so it's pretty long. It's a little intimidating. This needle is very, very wide, and you're going to use that to draw up your dose. It's usually 1 ml. Some people inject 1.5 mLs, but you're going to put 1 ml of air into the vial, draw up 1 ml of the liquid. Okay. And then you're going to put on a 22 gauge needle, which is a little bit thinner, but it's still 1.5 inches. So it's still pretty long. The reason this needle is so long is because it's going intramuscular. It's going a lot deeper than your other shots. So when you do this type of shot, your body kind of squeezes the needle as you go deeper. So you need a wider needle to kind of keep your skin open so the medication can come out. If you use a very thin needle and it went deep, your body would just squeeze the needle enough. You wouldn't be able to push the medication in. So you have to use this longer needle. Now, this shot doesn't hurt any more than any other shot if it's given properly. But the problem is that most people don't give the medication properly. I apologize. This is popping up here, but let me see.
I've heard people, so I never personally had to do PIO shots, but I've heard people say that they use ice beforehand or afterwards. Is there a tip that you would offer?
So people, I prefer ice, to be honest with you. A lot of clinics will give lidocaine, and you could put the lidocaine on. The problem with lidocaine is it takes 30 minutes to numb the area, and then it stays numb for like another hour. So it's not really ideal. Ice is nice because it numbs it up quickly. It gets deep into muscle tissue, where lidocaine kind of just sits on your surface of your skin. And then the ice kind of wears off quickly after the shot. And it also keeps the area cool to prevent any like bruising and swelling. So I really prefer ice. I have most of my patients do that. I actually give them a little ice pack, put it on like 5 minutes before the shot. It doesn't take very long. And then you're ready to do your shot. The big thing with this shot, and I'll tell you, it's a lot of people really struggle, is I get a lot of people saying that they're allergic to it. It does contain sesame oil. So if you're allergic to sesame oil, do not take the medication. If you're not sure, you can use it, but you want to see if you have any sort of reaction. But definitely, check your allergies against the ingredients. It can be compounded at local pharmacies with like olive oil or other forms of oil. So if you're allergic to sesame, you can still take it. What's nice about this shot is it's cheap. It's not very expensive, and it works very, very well. The problem is the administration. There are other forms of progesterone, like vaginal forms, that people jump to, but they're very, very expensive. So if you can do the shot properly, it'll save you a lot of money. If you do it correctly, it shouldn't really hurt very much either. So the two main keys with the shot are to give it in the proper area. So it's actually done a little bit above the top of the butt crack. I know it's a little hard to see here, but you want to give it in the correct spot. A lot of people do it in the cheeks. If you do it in the cheek, you will get all the medication, but it will hurt. It'll hurt a lot. So you definitely want to try to aim a little bit higher if you can, okay? And rotate the sides. Do one left side one night, right side the next. Keep track on a piece of paper if you're not sure. People always forget. And then keep switching off. And then the other thing is to inject this medication slowly. So it's an oil. It's a lot thicker than the other medications. If you inject it too quickly, it kind of sits under your skin. It takes your body a little while to pull the medication in. So if you inject it really quickly, a lot of husbands, they don't want to hurt their wives. They just shoot it in real fast. And then all that does is sit under your skin. It causes massive skin reactions. People say they're allergic to sesame oil. I now got to add sesame oil to their allergy list when they're not really allergic. And it causes all sorts of problems. So you want to inject it very slowly. I usually tell people over 30 seconds, maybe 45 seconds, if you can. I know that sounds like a long time, but once the medication, I know that Lynn's like, yeah, that's a long time. Once the needle enters your skin and the needle's held still, you shouldn't really feel the needle. So I usually, once the needle goes in, you're going to feel a little bit. But if it's given in the proper spot, it won't hurt very much. And then once the needle's in, you won't really feel it. So just go very slowly. And I promise you, it's going to be much less painful and you're going to have much less reactions to the shot. And that's the key. People have to do this medication daily, usually for the first trimester. Once you do for 3 months, 90 shots usually when you do a transfer. So it's not a small number of shots. You're gonna have to do it for a long time. So doing it correctly really makes a difference.
This is the one that people complain about the most and say that it hurts the most. And I still have women that I've worked with years later that said, I still like, I'm numb in that area now. And most likely it's because of the two things you just said. It needs to be the proper location and incredibly slowly, like
Okay.
really slow,
Really slow,
30 to
yeah.
45 seconds.
Yeah. If you're doing a larger dose, like 1.5 mLs, definitely like I've seen people inject it over a minute, and that's a long time. I mean, if you really sit there, but I know a lot of people get really anxious. They don't want to hurt the person that they're injecting, so they're doing it very quickly. But I promise you that's much, much worse doing it that way. So yeah, if you follow those steps, I think it'll be a lot easier for you. And we do this shot a lot for people because this is what people really struggle with. And with my company, I've done so many people for 90 days straight and they've had no reaction. And they're completely fine. They can walk fine. There's no hip pain. There's no leg pain. They can sit down. They can stand up. If it's given correctly, it's not a problem at all. So yeah.
So call Gene.
All right, yeah. So yeah, give me a call. I'm happy to do it. This medication is stored at room temperature. Do not put this in the fridge. It's an oil. It will solidify if you put it in the fridge. So you definitely want to keep it at room temperature. I've seen a lot of people trying to heat it to make it thinner. Don't do that. It does mess with the stability of the drug. So just keep it at room temperature. You can roll it in your hands a little bit if you want to add a little bit of heat, but it's not going to make much difference with the medication. So I would just tell you, just inject it at room temperature, that it's going to be fine that way. So, and then the last two medications I'll touch on are just really their growth hormone products. It's really when people are treatment resistant to Follistim or Menopur. A lot of times you'll take Follistim or Gonal, plus you'll take Menopur, plus they'll add on Omnitrope or Sazon, which are the growth hormone products. These medications are not FDA approved for fertility. All the above medications are used in fertility. These medications are used off-label by fertility clinics. The theory is that when you're younger and you have a large egg reserve, growth hormone is very prominent. You have a lot high levels of growth hormone in your body. So they think by supplementing with this, it will, kind of take your body back in time a little bit and help, improve your egg reserve. So these medications are both given subcutaneously. They're fairly easy injections to do. You do have to mix the medication. So there is a diluent bottle and there is a powder vial. These are given with insulin needles. So the same needles that come with Lupron, if you're doing Lupron in the kit, you can use the same needles there. But oftentimes the clinics will call in specific needles for these. And this medication is only given for like 5 days in your cycle. So it's a very short time in your cycle, but it can help tremendously for a lot of people. So in this case, it's all the same syringe with insulin needles. You can't remove the needle from the syringe. Everything's all connected. So you would just push in like 1 ml of air into the diluent vial, take 1 ml of diluent out, and then you would shoot it into the powder vial, activating the medication. Using the same needle, once it's dissolved, you would draw it up, and then you would use that same needle, same syringe, and you would inject it in the abdomen or the thigh. It's fine. This medication for Omnitrope specifically is refrigerated, but once you start using it, you don't have to store it in the fridge anymore. Some people like to. This medication is extremely expensive, so people get really worried about storing it at room temperature and it not being stable. So you feel free to put it in the fridge if you want. That's perfectly fine. Once you mix it, this vial is good for 2.5 days usually, depending on your dose, and then you get another vial that's good for another 2.5 days, and then that's your 5-day total. And that's basically the whole injection process with this. And then disposal is the same. Just make sure you toss your needles in the sharp container. And then Sazon is basically the same thing. I don't have a picture of the vials, but there is a diluent inside this box, and there's a powder vial, same as the Omnitropes. You would mix the two, inject them, and then they're always done in usually the abdomen. You would just continue to rotate sites. So in this case, if you're doing Gonal and Menopur and Sazon or Omnitrope, you would do 1, 2, and 3, and then the next day you would do 4, 1, and 2. If you're trying to rotate your injection sites, try to give your stomach a little bit of a break. I know it's difficult. All this is difficult. So, and then I think that's actually it for all the medications. But I'm happy to answer any questions. Administration, preparation, storage. If anybody has anything.
Oh, well, I have a few. So first and foremost, I want just for anybody watching to know, you are not going to have to give yourself all of these medications. It's and it is still a lot of medications and it's still very overwhelming. And when you get that box or you go to pick up your meds, take a deep breath and be prepared if it's your first time, because it's really overwhelming to see all of these all these medications spread out on your kitchen table. One of the questions that I get asked, and I have a solution, but I'm wondering about yours, is now that I have all these meds, what is a helpful way to organize them? Because some are in the fridge, some are out. There's the different needles. Do you have like your go-to organizational system?
So I see, I see a lot of patients do things very differently. A lot of my IVF patients are very organized people. They're obviously going through a lot, so they want to try to keep things, a lot of people will go and just go to the dollar store and get one of those storage containers that have like dividers. And this way they can store their Lupron with the Lupron syringes, and then their Menopur with their Menopur syringes and needles. This way there's nothing that's mixing. Everything's in one box together. When you go in to get your Menopur, you grab anything that's in that slot. Now, obviously, the refrigerated medications you have to store in a different area, but a lot of them, once you do the first shot, are stored at room temperature. So you can put them into that box if you'd like after you do the first shot. And then it keeps all your syringes lined up with the medications that they go with. Yeah.
Another offering I have for people is a shoe rack, like an over the door, like one of those clear shoe racks. I've seen a lot of people use those shoe organizers to organize their medication for the same reason. There's so many different needles. You want to make sure like you have the right needles with the right medication for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I had another question and it is escaping me at the moment. You keep talking about like medications can go in the fridge and then you can take it out and keep it at room temperature. Is that for all of the medications that are in the fridge, or is that just for some of them?
So that's just for some of them. So on the back of every box is a storage, the FDA requires that manufacturers put storage requirements on all of their products. So if you're not sure, just flip the box over and they'll tell you, the storage requirements for the product. It has to be kept in the fridge at a certain temperature. And then, once you use the product, it's good for this number of days at room temperature. They'll give you all that information on the product itself. So they make it pretty easy, but if you're not sure, you can call your pharmacy, or I'm happy to answer any of that stuff. But the manufacturers are required to put that on there. And every product's different. So, yeah.
Okay. And same thing, because I've heard of people saying to me, oh, I thought they were all supposed to go in the fridge and they put them all in the fridge. So in other words, if you are not sure, before you start injecting medications, call, because I would imagine that if you take a medication and put it in the fridge, it's not supposed to be in there. That could do something to it,
yeah,
right?
Most of the medications are okay if you put them in the fridge and then you take them out, but it's not necessary. Some will, like the progesterone oil, will actually solidify and it can actually damage the medication if it's put in the fridge. I've had people put it in the fridge. Oh my God, I should have done that. And then try to microwave it to heat it back up, and then that destroys the product. So you really want to, you're spending a lot on these medications, read it carefully. They all come with a lot of information. You want to make sure you store them correctly, and use them correctly so that, you get the most out of them.
Yeah. And I really just think like the biggest takeaway is if you are not sure, just ask. Call up your pharmacist, call up your nurses, and get answers to your questions. Don't panic. Don't try to fix it by microwaving. That's a new one to me. I've not heard that before. Call and figure out a solution. There is always a solution to it, and you will get it figured out. So, Jean, I cannot even tell you how helpful this is. Just kind of knowing even just little nuances, the little tidbits of information that you have offered here has just been so incredibly helpful. And I truly wish that I would have had some of this information when I was going through my treatments. Even just, the difference between the different administration spots, the PIO, I know it will be especially helpful to people because that's the one I get asked about the most. So any final thoughts for anyone that's watching on just navigating medications in general, just like something that they can walk away with besides the fact that they can do it, they can do hard things. I mean, just like one tidbit of information that you can offer up.
Yeah, I think, it's very overwhelming when I dispense all the medications to my patients. I find that it's a lot at one time. You're getting like usually 5 injectables or maybe more, a lot of syringes and needles, lidocaine, all this stuff. So just take it one medication at a time. There's a lot there, but each medication comes with instructions. And once you learn how to do the medication, you do it once or twice, it becomes a lot easier to do. So don't get too overwhelmed with the sheer number of injections, because you're not going to be doing every injection every day. You do like 1 or 2 this day, 1 or 2 this day, and just, take it one medication at a time is probably the easiest, because people get very overwhelmed by just looking at the grand scheme of things, but you're not doing them all at one time. So.
I think that is such a really helpful piece of offering and piece of information. Yeah, one step at a time. It's going to be really overwhelming. I had them like all on my kitchen table. I just kind of sorted it by medication because they kind of get like jumbled up. Organize it and just take it one medication at a time, one shot at a time.
Yeah.
Love it.
And then they all have side effects with our company. I developed like a side effect management protocol for it as well, so we can help people, because you are going to get different side effects from different medications, and you're not sure which one is coming from which. So there are things you can do to help. So talk to your doctor, talk to me. We're happy to help with any side effects or anything like that, and help with administration. So it's a lot, but you're not alone in this process.
You certainly are not. And so, Gene, anyone that is local to the Philly area or just in general that wants to get in touch with you, can you share your information? And we'll link it up as well.
Yeah. So the company's called Fertility Home Care. We have a website. It's fertilityhc.com. And all of our information is on there, our phone number and everything, our email and everything's through there. So you're happy to, contact us through there. Our email is support@fertilityhc.com. If you want to shoot me an email, I check the email every single day personally. So if you have any questions or you need anything, I'm happy to just, shoot you right back an email. You don't need to use our services. I'll just, happy to answer anything. And yeah, that's where you guys can reach us.
And thank you so much for that. And you can also find a link to Fertility Home Care on the Kindred Beginnings resource page. We have you on there, and you can just go over to there and we will link right up too.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Gene, thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Lynn. I appreciate you.